They say family is the one place you can always return to. But what if home is the very place that destroys you? When my father died, I thought grief would bring us closer. Instead, it ripped the mask off everything I believed in. Late-night calls drained me. Bank papers appeared with my shaky signature, and a hidden group chat mocked me as the burden. I told myself it was sorrow twisting us, but I was wrong. The betrayal wasn't grief's accident, it was their plan. And when the will was read, my father's last secret set fire to the lies. I sank into the back seat of my car after the funeral, dress still stiff, with the scent of lilies and damp soil. My father was gone, but I tried to console myself with one fragile thought. At least I still had my family. I repeated it like a prayer, as if those words could stitch me back together. When I opened my phone, there it was, our smiling faces plastered across Facebook, the caption proclaiming, "Together, even in grief." Oh, strangers commented with heart emojis and words like, "What a strong family." I wanted to believe it. I clung to it because the alternative, that those smiles were rehearsed, that I was already being erased, was too unbearable. But even in that photo, something gnawed at me. On the edge of the table sat a white envelope, half hidden beneath a dish of untouched rolls. My signature was on the papers inside. I remembered the tremor in my hand when Mom had shoved them across my kitchen table at 2 a.m. She said it was just insurance paperwork. Her tone clipped with urgency, her eyes red from manufactured tears. I had signed without reading, too tired to fight. And now that envelope was memorialized in a photo the whole world could see, a silent witness to something far darker than grief. I stared at it until my eyes blurred, but I pushed the thought away. I told myself, don't overthink. They love you. If love had been real, why did I always feel small? My mother's calls came nightly, disguised as updates about casseroles and condolence cards, but really scripts designed to keep me awake, to keep me apologizing. My sister's words were laced with sugar, but they stung. "You're so sensitive, you read too much into things." Gaslighting, though I didn't know the term then, felt like living in a funhouse mirror where I could no longer trust my own reflection. When I asked my brother for help sorting through Dad's workshop, he laughed. "You just want pity. Stop making everything about you." His voice carried the authority of someone who had decided long ago that my role in this family was caretaker, not equal. Each time I protested, they rolled their eyes, dismissing me as fragile, dramatic. The chorus of dismissal grew so loud, I started to hum it myself. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe my exhaustion, my chest tightening at every request, my trembling hands, maybe those were proof that I was weak. I began keeping a journal, not out of discipline but desperation. Late at night, when the phone had finally stopped buzzing, I wrote what I was too afraid to say aloud. I feel used. I feel invisible. I feel like a ghost carrying everyone else's grief on my back. Some nights the ink bled from the pressure of my pen. Other nights the pages were nearly blank, as if words themselves had abandoned me. Yet that act of writing gave me a fragile anchor, a reminder that I existed beyond their script. Still, I forgave them. Or rather, I explained them away. They were hurting too, I reasoned. Grief makes monsters of us all. If Mom snapped at me, it was sorrow. If my sister mocked me, it was stress. If my brother sneered, it was exhaustion. I gave them every excuse, every benefit of the doubt, even as I denied myself the same compassion. But shadows grew. The photo with the envelope kept flashing in my mind. The late-night signatures I barely remembered. The financial statements that never quite added up. The way conversations shifted when I walked into a room. All of it collected like static around me. My instincts screamed, but I smothered them, afraid of what they would confirm. Then came the night when I closed my journal and whispered into the silence. What if it's not me? What if it's them? The question felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. I shook my head, snapped off the light, and told myself to sleep. But the words lingered, echoing with a strange kind of power. I did not know then that every line of doubt I scribbled in those pages would later become more than confessions. They would be evidence. My shaky handwriting, my timestamps, my raw truth, things I thought were weaknesses, would one day speak louder than the polished lies of my family. And as I drifted into restless sleep, still replaying that smiling Facebook photo, I had no idea that the real story of betrayal had already begun. The envelope in that picture was not just a slip of paper. It was the first domino. Once it fell, nothing in my life would stand untouched. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening when my sister suggested we jump on a family video call to keep Dad's memory alive. I joined reluctantly, camera off, notebook open beside me. The conversation was shallow, all chatter about casseroles and sympathy cards. Then, by mistake, or maybe fate, her screen shared something she never meant to show. A group chat appeared, titled "No More Burden." At first, I thought it was some cousin thread, but then I saw my name repeated, emojis of rolling eyes, and a meme mocking me as a vacuum cleaner sucking up resources. My heart stung, but the real wound came seconds later. Someone had posted a screenshot of Dad's bank account. Balance nearly zero. The withdrawals lined up like knife marks, each transaction signed off under power of attorney. My breath caught. The account that had always been steady, the account Dad said would secure us all, emptied. I froze, hands trembling, throat burning as though I'd swallowed fire. I couldn't breathe. They weren't just mocking me. They were bleeding my father's life dry even after his death. I snapped a photo of the screen before it vanished, my hand shaking so badly, the image blurred. I didn't care. Proof existed. I closed the laptop, pressed my palms over my eyes, and whispered, "This can't be happening." My chest rattled, heart pounding against my ribs. Every nerve screamed, fight, run, collapse. The room tilted. For a moment, I thought I'd faint. But before I could pull myself together, one last message slid across the chat. A cousin typed, "Remember, keep her in the dark until the wedding. After that, she's out for good." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. They weren't stumbling through grief. They were orchestrating my erasure. And yet, the cruelest truth hadn't arrived. Buried beneath the thread was a pinned note from my mother herself. "Make sure she signs everything. She's too soft to question it. Use her guilt." I nearly screamed. My own mother, the woman who had raised me, had written instructions for my destruction. I slammed the laptop shut, clutching my knees to my chest, rocking as tears blurred my sight. The illusion shattered. I was not safe in this family. I was prey. For 2 days I stumbled through the fog. My attempts at gathering evidence failed spectacularly. The USB drive where I tried to save screenshots corrupted. The audio recording I made of a tense phone call came out warped. My voice drowned beneath static. Each failure pushed me deeper into despair. and I began to wonder if the universe itself wanted me to remain voiceless. One night, after another failed attempt to back up files, I collapsed on the floor of Dad's study, surrounded by boxes of old books he had loved. In exhaustion, I pulled a worn hardcover from the pile and opened it. A folded sheet of paper slipped out, edges yellowed, handwriting fragile. My breath caught when I recognized his script. "Mara," it began, ink shaky but intentional. "If you are reading this, I fear what I suspected has already come to pass. Trust no one but the paper trail. They will twist your words, but numbers do not lie." I pressed the letter to my chest, sobbing, the grief of losing him surging back with fresh claws. For a moment, all the betrayal fell silent, and it was just me and Dad, as if he had reached through the veil of death to place a hand on my shoulder. His words gave me more than instruction. They gave me a pulse of strength. I had been searching for validation in the eyes of those who wanted me destroyed. Here was proof that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts had been right all along. Dad had known. He had left me a map. When I lifted my face from the letter, something had shifted. I wasn't the ghost haunting my family anymore. I was the keeper of the truth, the heir not just to his name, but to his suspicion and his foresight. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into my journal, and whispered, "I'll follow the paper trail, Dad. I'll finish what you couldn't." And in that moment, the trembling victim who had begged for scraps of love began to die. In her place rose someone sharper, colder in resolve, yet still aching with loss, a woman ready to become a strategist. But a final thought clawed at me as I blew out the lamp and lay in the dark. If this letter was real, if Dad had anticipated their betrayal, then he must have known how far they would go. And that meant everything I thought was safe wasn't. The letter from my father became my compass, and the phrase "trust the paper trail" echoed with every step I took. I started small, combing through bank statements, insurance documents, and email chains. Patterns emerged like bruises under skin, withdrawals timed at 2 a.m, transfers marked as charitable donations. At first glance, they seemed like generous gifts in my father's name. But when I dug deeper, the charity's registration was barely legitimate. Its address a rundown strip mall, its phone number disconnected. It was my mother's project. The more I pulled, the more tangled the threads became. One receipt led me to a wallet ID buried inside a crypto exchange. Transactions pinged in and out, converted and washed, reappearing in other accounts with no clear trail, except the timing always matched withdrawals from Dad's estate. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. My mother had learned to launder money while the rest of us mourned. Still, doubt gnawed at me. I remembered signing documents late at night, my hand trembling, my mother's voice firm. Could I have agreed to all this? I uploaded the scanned forms into an AI verification tool, desperate for clarity. The analysis returned red flags immediately. Strokes of ink that did not match my natural pressure, signatures that flickered under forensic comparison. Deep-fake handwriting forged by someone who had studied me closely. I sat back, heart hammering. My identity, my very hand, had been stolen. I closed my eyes and asked the question I had avoided. If your father foresaw the betrayal, would you feel comfort in his foresight, or despair that he left you to fight it alone? The answer refused to settle. On some nights it was both, yet I kept digging. In one box of family photos, I noticed something strange. on my mother's hand in every recent picture. The glint of her wedding ring looked unfamiliar, thicker, heavier. When I enlarged the image, I saw faint etchings along the inner curve, like tiny marks meant for more than sentiment. A chill ran through me. What could possibly be hidden there? I filed the thought away, too unsettled to chase it. The next step was allies. I could no longer shoulder this war alone. Tentatively, I reached out to a journalist I had followed for years, one who specialized in nonprofit fraud. To my surprise, she responded immediately. When I described the charity, she laughed bitterly. "They scammed me too," she said. Her article had been buried years ago by threats and pressure. Now she had a reason to reopen it, with me as her source. Then came an unexpected message from a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She had once interned at a local radio station where my mother had given an interview during Dad's illness. She handed me a recording, shaky but clear enough. My mother's voice, dripping with disdain. "She's weak, easy to control. She'll sign whatever we hand her." I listened to it 3 times, the words carving into my chest, equal parts wound and weapon. For the first time, I had proof not just of theft, but of intent. Still, when I carried all my findings to a lawyer, he regarded me with skepticism. "Families fight over money all the time," he said, flipping through the papers without much care. "It doesn't mean fraud." My throat tightened, despair clawing up again. But when I slid across the bank screenshots, the crypto trail, and finally the letter in Dad's hand, his posture changed. He leaned closer, eyes scanning line by line. When he finally looked up, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Your father left you something. More than an inheritance, he left you the key to their undoing." I clutched the table, trembling, torn between relief and terror. In that moment, I knew the tide had shifted. I was no longer a daughter, scrambling for scraps of dignity. I was the bearer of truth, armed with evidence and allies. And justice was no longer a dream. It was a countdown. The day of reckoning was coming. Revenge, my father once said in jest, is best served cold. I never imagined I would test that theory at my brother's wedding, but the timing was perfect. Everyone expected me to explode at a family dinner or cry during the will reading. They thought my grief would trap me in silence. Instead, I waited for the day. The whole family would dress in borrowed dignity, standing beneath flowers and chandeliers, live-streamed for the world to see. I sat in the pews, my hands trembling beneath a velvet clutch that held a tiny flash drive. Cameras hovered overhead like vultures, streaming the ceremony to relatives abroad and friends who couldn't attend. The pastor spoke of love, of unity, of loyalty that lasts beyond death. My brother and his bride smiled, bathed in soft light. My mother's pearls gleamed at the front row, her hand folded primly, that cursed wedding band glinting. Then the music cut. From the speakers came my father's voice, weak but steady. "If you're hearing this, something has gone wrong." Gasps ricocheted through the church. Guests turned, confused, some fumbling with phones. My mother's face drained of color. My brother dropped his fiancée's hand. The recording continued. "These documents are not hers. She was forced. The money was stolen." The sanctuary turned into a stage, and the world was watching. Comments flooded the live stream. "What is happening? Is this real?" The bride trembled, tears streaking her makeup as whispers surged like a storm. When the audio ended, silence swallowed the room. Then came chaos. My mother rose, shouting, "Lies, all lies!" My brother lunged toward me, face red, veins taut. But it was too late. The evidence was public. The internet had already claimed the truth, freezing it in the endless archives of screenshots and reposts. That night, my phone erupted with calls and messages. The wedding clip spread faster than wildfire. Strangers tagged me, praised me, pitied me, demanded more. But the blow I dealt was only the beginning, because predators fight hardest when cornered. Within 24 hours, the smear campaign began. A video appeared online showing me rifling through papers, the audio manipulated to make me sound greedy. "She only wants money," the captions declared. My mother appeared in an interview, her voice breaking as she called me unstable, a selfish child exploiting her father's death. For a moment, the tide shifted. I doubted myself, terrified the world would believe them. And then, another twist. One of my allies leaked the full group chat archive. Every cruel word, every mocking meme, every instruction to manipulate me spilled into the open. Hashtags surged, #toxic family exposed. Overnight, the narrative flipped. Their attempt at erasure became proof of their cruelty. I sat on my bed in the dark, scrolling through messages from strangers. Thousands of people wrote, "I went through this too. You are not alone." For the first time in years, I felt something warm press against the hollow inside my chest. Solidarity. It was a pause in the storm, a breath I had never allowed myself to take. Tears spilled, not from despair, but from recognition. I was no longer invisible, but I knew online sympathy could only carry me so far. The legal fight was coming. Screenshots and hashtags might shift public opinion, but courts demanded more. And the evidence I held, the crypto trail, the forged signatures, the letter from my father, was enough to ignite a battle they could not win. As I closed my journal that night, the weight of inevitability pressed down on me. My family thought the wedding humiliation was the end game. They had no idea it was only the first strike. The reckoning had not yet begun, because justice, real justice, was waiting at the courthouse doors. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, a place where lives were measured in evidence and ink. I sat at the plaintiff's table, papers stacked neatly before me, palms damp with sweat. My father's letter rested in my pocket like a heartbeat, a reminder of why I was here. Across the aisle, my mother wore a dark suit, her pearl necklace gleaming like armor. My brother slouched beside her, eyes darting, while my sister clutched her handbag as if it held the last of her dignity. The judge opened the session. Allegations of financial fraud, abuse of power of attorney, misappropriation of charitable funds. All the words that had once felt impossible to say now filled the air with the weight of truth. Screens lit up with exhibits, screenshots of group chats, the charity's sham registration, the crypto trail traced transaction by transaction. My attorney's voice was steady, slicing through the silence. This is not grief gone awry. This is calculated exploitation. Then my mother stood. Her voice trembled as she accused me of manipulation, of fabricating evidence for money. She called me a troubled daughter, blinded by greed. For a second, my throat tightened, fear prickling. The courtroom leaned in, uncertainty shifting like a tide. But in her desperation, she went too far. She submitted a document to prove my supposed consent. A contract signed in my name. My attorney calmly requested forensic analysis. The projection screen magnified the signature, and the AI tool confirmed what we already knew. forgery. The ink pressure mismatched, strokes inconsistent. The judge frowned. My mother's lie had detonated in her own hands. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt the room tilt, a dizzy recognition that even in defending herself, she had chosen betrayal. Then came the moment I never expected. The bailiff opened the door, and an older man stepped forward, leaning on a cane. It was my father's longtime business partner, a man who had vanished from our lives after the funeral. I had assumed he'd chosen their side, like everyone else. But now he approached the stand, voice rough but unwavering. He testified that my father had confided in him months before his death, fearing the very fraud we were now exposing. He handed over emails, receipts, even a notarized statement my father had prepared in case of exactly this scenario. My knees shook beneath the table. For a heartbeat, I felt my father's presence again, not just in memory, but in the foresight he had planted like seeds. The paper trail was blooming exactly as he had promised. The gavel struck. My brother was stripped of inheritance rights, left bankrupt after debts surfaced. My sister lost her petition for guardianship over Mom, her reputation shredded, and my mother, once the axis of my world, was referred for criminal investigation. The woman who had raised me would now answer to the law. Yet when I flipped through the court exhibits, my eyes caught on an old family photograph, tucked among the evidence. Dad stood smiling, Mom's arm around him, my brother and sister grinning in unison. I was there too, younger, oblivious, smiling because I still believed in us. My chest cracked open, tears blurred the page. I did not feel victorious. I felt like I was mourning all over again. Not just the father I lost, but the family I thought I had. For the first time, I let myself grieve honestly. Not the polished grief of funerals or Facebook posts, but the raw grief of knowing I had been expendable to the people I loved most. And still, through the tears, I touched the edges of something new. It was not vengeance. It was not the thrill of winning. It was the quiet strength of standing on my own 2 feet, no longer bending beneath their weight. I whispered to myself, "You survived. You are free." Justice had been delivered, but freedom tasted bittersweet. I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, head high yet heart heavy. The cameras outside flashed, voices shouted questions, hashtags already trending. But I didn't answer. This wasn't for them. It was for me. Still, as the doors closed behind me, I knew this wasn't the end. Court orders and headlines were only the beginning. Healing would take longer. Boundaries would need to be built, trust carefully chosen. And as I clutched my father's letter one last time, I felt its final echo. This is not the end, Mara. It's the beginning. After the trial, the first thing I did was clean my phone. Contacts I had once guarded like relics, my mother, my siblings, the cousins who laughed behind my back, were erased with the press of a button. Block, delete, silence. For years I had been tethered to them by invisible wires of guilt and obligation. Now cutting those wires felt like breathing for the first time. Social media accounts that once tethered me to their constant narrative were locked down, profiles scrubbed. Their eyes no longer followed me through screens. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. Still, even in that purge, I left a single exception. Tucked in the drawer beside my bed was an envelope addressed to my mother. Inside, a letter I had written but never sent. I told her how it felt to grow up as her shield, her scapegoat, her ghost. I told her how her betrayal had nearly ended me and how I had clawed my way back. I did not accuse. I did not scream. I wrote with the voice of the daughter she never saw, offering one final truth. But I left the envelope sealed. Sometimes I would touch it, wondering if forgiveness was possible or if forgiveness even mattered. Maybe one day the letter would reach her hands. Maybe it never would. Leaving it unsent kept me human. It proved I wasn't just a strategist or survivor. I was still a daughter, capable of love even after the ruin. Days turned into weeks. Grief ebbed, replaced by the strange quiet of freedom. I filled that quiet with small rituals, morning walks, therapy sessions, meals cooked for myself alone. Each act felt like a rebellion against years of self-erasure. I was not a servant. I was not a victim. I was simply me. And then came the future. With the funds restored through legal restitution, I didn't splurge or hide. I invested. I started a consulting practice, helping others escape toxic financial entanglements. At first, only a handful of clients found me. Then word spread. Survivors of family betrayal, women who had been silenced, men gaslit by relatives. They all came, looking for strategies, for a voice that said, "You're not crazy, you're not alone." One night, on a whim, I shared my story on TikTok. I expected nothing but the clip of me speaking into my camera, hair unstyled, voice steady, spread like fire, views in the millions, comments in the tens of thousands. People across the world confessed their own hidden wounds. They called me brave, but I didn't feel brave. I felt necessary. Soon I was invited to speak at conferences, to appear on podcasts, to write essays. My story, once a scar I tried to hide, became a torch I carried into dark places. Every time I told it, I honored my father's memory and the lesson he left behind. Trust the paper trail, but more than that, trust yourself. Yet no matter how far I traveled, I carried the sealed letter in my bag. It was my reminder that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing how much of it I allowed into my present. Some nights I would sit on hotel beds, staring at the envelope, wondering if my mother regretted, if she lay awake haunted by the truth. But whether she did or not no longer defined me. What defined me was the life I was building. Steady, bright, unshackled. I stood one evening on a stage, lights blinding, audience hushed. I told them how betrayal breaks you, but also how it remakes you. I told them healing is not a straight climb, but a sin wave, rising and falling, demanding patience. And I told them that hope is not naive, it is defiance. The applause shook the room. For the first time, I did not shrink. I took up all the space I deserved. As I walked off stage, I thought of that letter again. Would I ever open the door for reconciliation? Perhaps, perhaps not. The story wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I had been the invisible daughter. Now I was a woman, visible to thousands, visible to myself most of all. My family's silence no longer defined me. My own voice did. And whether or not they ever came back with regret, I had already stepped beyond their reach, because survival was never the end. Thriving was.